Welcome to the Macabre Coven. We are venomous sin, and venomous sin declares war on hypocrisy, fake fucks, and the politically correct world that tries to silence you. We are the band that refuse to kneel and stand up for the ones the world try to silence with fake smiles and so-called status. You screamed, "We hear and you are not alone." Let's talk about fear. Not the kind you get from horror movies or jump scares. I mean real fear, the kind that creeps under your skin when you see something that doesn't fit the script. Something you've been taught to avoid, reject, or laugh at. Something like BDSM. Yeah, that word. It still makes people uncomfortable. Still makes people whisper. And for a society that loves to pretend it's so sex positive, so liberated, so accepting, the second you mention whips or collars or power dynamics in bed, suddenly the room gets real quiet. Why? That's what we're going to rip open today. Because this is not just about kink, this is about shame, power, history, and the way we've all been trained to fear our own desires. Let's start with something blunt. BDSM has always existed. Always. Since long before hashtags, long before Freud, long before the invention of the modern bed frame. The idea of playing with control, of finding pleasure in submission or dominance, that's older than civilization. So why does it scare people? It's not because of the leather, or the ropes, or the handcuffs. It's not about the visuals. Those are just symptoms. What society fears is what BDSM represents. It represents freedom. The kind of freedom that doesn't fit into their sanitized, polite little boxes. The kind of freedom that says, my body, my rules, my desires, no shame. And that is dangerous to them. You see, society doesn't like when people start claiming power over their own bodies in ways that don't serve the system. They're fine with sex as long as it sells products. As long as it's cute, filtered, and marketable. But the second that sex becomes too raw, too powerful, too personal, they call it sick. Think about that. We live in a world where violence is entertainment, but a woman wanting to be tied up is considered a red flag? Let me tell you something real. There is more honesty in a well-negotiated kink scene than in half the marriages I've ever seen. Consent, communication, boundaries, aftercare. These aren't edgy buzzwords, they're the core of it. BDSM is not about abuse. It's not about trauma. It's about clarity. And that's another reason people fear it, because BDSM forces you to get real. About what you want, about what you need, about who you are when the mask comes off. We've been raised in a culture that says desire should be quiet, that women shouldn't want too much, that men shouldn't be vulnerable, that if you're different, you're broken. But I'm calling bullshit on that. If you're into dominance, good, own it. If you want to surrender and feel safe doing it, that's strength. If you crave something intense, something ritualistic, something that makes you feel alive, then welcome. You are not alone. I want to dig into history for a second. BDSM didn't suddenly appear with 50 Shades of Grey. Long before that train wreck came along, there were entire underground scenes, leather communities, dungeons, parties, magazines that had to hide behind locked cabinets. People risked their jobs, their reputations, sometimes even their freedom just to explore who they were. And you know what they did while they were being shamed and mocked? They built community. They created education. They developed systems for safety, negotiation, ethical play. While the rest of the world was choking on taboos and pretending to be vanilla angels, these perverts were building the blueprint for modern consent culture. You ever heard of safe, sane, and consensual? That came from kink. You ever heard of rack, risk, aware, consensual kink? That came from people who weren't afraid to own their complexity. And now, in 2025, even with all this information, all this visibility, people are still scared. Still whispering, still judging. Why? Because BDSM breaks the illusion. It reminds people that we are not as polite as we pretend to be, that deep down, some of us want to kneel, some of us want to command, some of us want to be marked, held, owned, worshipped, and none of that fits into the algorithm. That scares the influencers, that scares the preachers, that scares the therapists who still see kink as pathology. And yet there we are, still rising, still claiming space, still not asking for permission. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. BDSM isn't about pain, it's about truth. The kind of truth that lives in your bones. The kind of truth that makes your skin feel electric. The kind of truth that says, this is who I am, and I'm not sorry. I built Lina's dungeon for that reason. Because I wanted a place where we could speak openly, where we could talk about sexuality not as shame, not as scandal, but as rebellion, as self-ownership, as war against silence. If that speaks to you, come find me. Visit habarimex.com and dive into the dungeon. You'll find essays, art, and unapologetic honesty. And if you're ready to wear your truth on the outside, check out altstyleclothing.com, our web store full of dark fashion, statement pieces, and gear that lets the world know you've stopped pretending. Final thought. They fear what they cannot control, and there is nothing more uncontrollable than a woman who knows what she wants and refuses to feel ashamed for it. If you're listening to this, and you've ever felt like your desires made you weird, broken, or dangerous, remember this. The world doesn't get to define you. You do. So keep exploring the taboo, because that's where the power is. If you like the show, hit subscribe, share it to anyone that you think should hear it. If you've ever been silenced, manipulated, excluded, we are here for you. We're venomous sin, and venomous sin declares war. You are not alone.